Hey, what's going on, guys? So today I want to show you how I made the last track that I released, Hulk Smash, featuring my niece and nephews. So this was actually a fun one to do. I was with my family over the weekend, and I just wanted to record my niece and nephews. I grabbed my iPhone, just my regular phone camera, and just asked them to do some weird noises, asked them to do some weird stuff, and they delivered. I came home the next day, and I just started going through everything that I recorded and started to mash it up. Here's some of the samples that I had, or some of the recordings that I had. As you can see, they're a bunch of little weirdos, but it was a lot of fun to do this. To get started, I went through all of these little chop ups that I got. My main thing that I started with is actually my little nephew here. So he was jumping up and down, and that already sounds like a great kick. Grabbing every other sample that I was finding, seeing if I can make a nice little rhythm to start out with. I started to add it here. So you can already hear it has like a nice little rhythm there. And I just kept on finding little samples here and there that I could feel could go right after that or right on top, just to see what sounds good to make a good track. All of this is pretty much just trial and error. I didn't really have an exact plan of which way I was going to go with this. Trying to hear some sounds that I could maybe manipulate, make sure that they sound good, and that I can actually add to this beat. Then I started adding little drops here. And the first one that I definitely liked was my nephew again, the one that was jumping up and down. He sets Hulk Smash. That's it, and then it drops. And again, that's the main rhythm that's going through the whole beat. If you really see it, this is the main rhythm that's going through the whole beat. Just a couple chop ups here and there. I started to arrange it little by little, but I wasn't really going too crazy on arrangement yet. I really wanted to find the right sounds first. And as I was finding the sounds, the arrangement started coming together, so it was working out. After I had that rhythm and I had a couple Hulk smashes here, I even got a little triplet of a Hulk. I already had a little arrangement going there, so I was starting to build it up. I was like, you know what, let me start making some drums just so I can have something in the background as I'm creating these. All the kick, snare, the hats, the crash, and everything was made out of the noises that my niece and nephews gave me. So I manipulated them in order to sound like a kick. Now here we have the kick, and of course I used the little thump when my nephew was jumping up and down. That sounded like a cool sounding kick. I used the simpler in Ableton, dragged in the waveform. Here is the little jumping up and down that my nephew was doing. I didn't really need to do too much because it already started sounding like a kick from the beginning. So I just took a little piece of it, and as you could already hear, it kind of already sounds like a little bit like a kick. So I added a little compressor, a little drum bus here. Now that's definitely sounding like a kick right there. I had to shave off some frequencies that I wasn't feeling on it, and I took some of the highs at the high end out to give it a nice little punchiness. Now my transient master, give it a nice little extra punch to it, and then I finalized it with another EQ. And the same thing with the snare. I definitely enhanced it so I can make it sound like a rim or a snare. So I added a punch drive, drum bus right there, some overdrive to kind of give it a little oomph. Yes, oomph is a word that I use a lot. The noise drums, now the decapitator, didn't do too much to this. I just added a little bit of drive and was finding some of the styles down here that I liked it, and I took some of the high end off. It had a little bit too much high end, so I wanted to make sure that it was a nice click that fit in the mix nicely. EQ all the frequencies that I don't want in there. I added its own little reverb because I felt like this snare needed its own little reverb to stick out to the mix. I didn't want to put it in the same reverb that the rest of the drums were in. I actually had two snares. The second snare, I made two snares, one with a little higher frequency and one with a little lower frequency. And with the rhythm that I made out of the chops, so it already has a nice little beat already behind it before I really did any melodies or anything like that. So I didn't do too much to the hi-hats. As you see, I used the warp function on Ableton. So the warp function I like on Ableton because it lets you stretch and shrink waveforms without really messing with the tempo if you want to, and you can do a lot of stuff with that. In this instance, I took the little bit, I warped it, and I shrunk it as small as possible, so it's a nice little small little clip. That's a pretty cool hat. I added a little overdrive to it, nothing too much, and then just like the other track, I love these beat slicers. and I used one on the hi-hat. When you play it, it kind of gives you a nice little off-tempo beats. Kind of little rolls like that. Not very much trappy like, but it gives you those little rolls that I really like. It gives a little more texture and more personality to the track itself. And again, the hat, I did the same thing to it. Took the same piece that I did for the hi-hat. Now I added a decapitator and I really punished it. So this punisher right here is pretty much like a drive, so it's kind of like distortion, and it really compresses it. I took some of the low end out because I wanted some of the high end for the crash to hit. I didn't want it to sound like a stick, I wanted it to sound like a crash, more like a hit, like an impact. And I added a lot of reverb to it. So I like where I was going with this, and after I had the drums going, I was like, all right, let me just keep chopping those samples up, try to get some melodies, see what else I can come up with. Like I said before, this was all trial and error, and it's all really experimenting. You find one sound and you tweak it a certain way, and it kind of inspires you to do a completely different thing that you were really expecting. So I really like this process. It's very inspirational. You know, I like getting creative with it. Then I wanted to do a couple more chops on here. I took the same sample out of my nephew. I pitched it differently so I can make a little synth out of it. See the little chop ups here? So if you click on them, this one I didn't tune at all. This one I left it normally, but I did warp it so I can get a nice crazy sound out of it. I shortened it up so I can make a nice little small sound and really manipulate it whichever way I wanted to. Now the second one, you see I went up 3 semitones. And then the third one, 5 semitones. And I believe that's all it is. It's just 0, 3, and 5 semitones, but I found a pattern. And for this one, I manipulated it quite a bit. I got the peak filter and I messed with the filter. I wanted to find the right frequency to fit in this track perfectly. I didn't want to overwhelm certain frequencies. Now this stereo tune, I like this one because it, again, on the other video I showed you guys, it widens the track. It just, instead of sounding like it's a little bit in the middle, whatever, just winds it up to the speakers. And I added some delay and some reverb to it. I also added a panner. I got this from Sound Toys and I just added a panner. Made sure that it was going to the rhythm. I actually clicked on it because we are at 95 beats per minute. I wanted it a little bit faster, so I was tapping it to the right rhythm that I wanted. And I got down to 192 BPM. So as you see, it's going from left to right. And when you play it, I don't know if you're here, I think it might be mono, but it goes as it plays it. The second synth, I found a completely different sound that I pretty much did the exact same thing that I did with the first synth. I just took the sound, I took the waveform, and started manipulating. I didn't warp it this time, but I did raise it 5 semitones. Then the second one is at 8 semitones. We go to 10 semitones, and then it keeps going that way, and then I find a pattern to give you this sound. So pretty much the same pattern as the first one, just a different sound. And same as the other one, I manipulated it the same way. I got the filter, the stereo tune, the delay, and the reverb, and I also added the panning for it. Now these two play on different times of the beat, so they don't mash with each other. It works out perfectly. It gives you the same type of melody going, but with a different sound. So it's still familiar. Now there were a couple things that I didn't chop up that way. I ended up dragging some of them and putting it on the simpler that I showed you, the little sampler that Ableton has. The two effects that I did were kind of like shouts, you know, and that just kind of goes in the background. Just is a constant, actually. It just keeps going on the background as a constant. And I didn't do too much to it. I just took a little bit of it, I warped it, and I stressed it a little bit so I can get that sound. Then the second one, pretty much the same thing. I got another little piece of it, and it's another shout. Now this is a higher shout than the other one, but I have this one and the lower one going pretty much the whole beat. So that's just kind of like an extra little rhythm in the background. Not too much emphasis on that, but a little extra to give the track a little more character. The arrangement was a little weird because I wasn't exactly sure where I was going. It kind of just started creating as I was going. I would put a sound and then I was like, oh, this sound goes good with that. So I was kind of just building as I went. Now I wanted a little rise impact going into every single drop. So I took the kick that I had, the one with my nephew was jumping up and down, and I literally just reversed it. Nice little reverse going into the drop. As you can see over here, I did add a little auto filter. And then of course it has its delay and reverb because I want it to be a nice little impact going into it. So you hear it as it goes into the drop. So it gives it a nice little extra like expectation right before the drop. Now that's pretty much all the chopping up that I did. Like I said, it was pretty simple that way. It just took me a couple hours to do this, but it was fun. And then, as you can see, this whole big mess that I got going on here, this is all just arrangements. I got the Hulk smash going with effects. So I added a couple effects. So what I have going on in the main parts, here are the dubstep parts. So as you can see, I separated them twice. One up here and one down here. This is the clean one. So there's only a couple EQ little shavings that I did because the frequencies were all over the place. I added an extra one that I really wanted to manipulate, and this is the one that you see down here. Peak filter. Now this is the Resicord, which it gave it a little extra like electronic robotic sound in the back. I made it a little wider to make it just seem bigger when it hits the track. And then the delay, not too much delay on that one, just enough to let it ring out a little bit. I used my auto filter. I didn't do any automation on it. I used some more Sound Toys plugins. This is a micro shit. This one was just an experiment as I was going with it. It added some extra grugginess that I wanted for that Hulk smash, you know, because I want the Hulk to sound crazy. Another Sound Toys plugin, I used a little alter boy. This one allows you to drop the pitch. So you can either go high pitch, sound like a little chipmunk, or go really low, sound like Hulk or a monster pretty much, which is what I was going for. And I added a little drive to give that to him. As you can hear, it kind of has like a little more robotic, little monsterish type sound to it, and I wanted that to go with it because I was going for not necessarily dubstep sound, but I was going for an aggressive drop like that. Now this is the Hulk smash with all those effects. Yeah, so you hear there's definitely a monster in the background there. Now I played it with the original one, so it was still clear. So you can hear my nephew, and you can hear the Hulk smash in the background going crazy. That just adds a little emphasis to the track itself. And that's pretty much it. I just added some more EQs here, some reverbs and everything in order for the whole track to come together. The only thing that I didn't make from scratch was the 808. So I just went out of my sample packs that I have, and I found a nice little 808. It just carries the track a little bit. It's not too intense, but it just gives you that bass that you need in the track in order for it to work nicely. So that's the track in its entirety right there. It was fun making a track out of weird noises from my niece and nephews, and you know what? It's not going to be the last time I do that because they do a lot of crazy stuff that I would love to make music with. That's it. So that's the video. So if you want to check the full track, go ahead and check the video. That's the full track for you, Hulk Smash, featuring my niece and nephews.